Neuroplasticity is a concept that has emerged in recent years in neuroscience that talks about the way in which the brain wires itself. So before, people used to think that during childhood, your brain wired itself, the neural pathways were created and formed, and that was like a fixed event, that once that had happened, it was done. But what scientists have discovered in the last decade is that there are times when your brain goes through a rewiring process, particularly during adolescence, for example. But then there are also other things that can trigger a rewiring of the brain. Things like stress, but then there are also desirable opportunities to sort of trigger the rewiring. And that has led to this whole concept of moving away from an understanding of the brain's and the intelligence of someone as a fixed thing into something that is an ongoing growth process. And that was why they coined that phrase, having a growth mindset. Well, the 45-second version of how parents can impact on the neural pathways of their children is literally through the experiences that they offer their children. Whether those are negative or positive, each of those experiences forms a pathway. So the more, from an educational perspective, the more varied, the more inspiring, the more engaging an experience of a child, and also the more they themselves are active in the process, the better the outcome in terms of neural formation. A discipline that creates a more positive behavior in a child, or the formation of neural pathways around a positive formation of neural pathways in a child, relates to engaging a child with a reasoning process around the discipline. And that's not to say that there isn't a place for boundaries. So having boundaries is important, but children, and particularly adolescents, behave better if they understand the reason why they should be behaving in that way and the impact that they have. And so you talk about a sort of a rule of consequences. So the child should understand, what did I do wrong? Why is it wrong? Do I understand that what I've done is wrong? And then what impact has that had on those around me? How have I created a negative experience for other people? And then very importantly, what can I personally do to change the side? So you spoke about a naughty corner. A naughty corner is useless unless there's a process that the child is going through when they're in the naughty corner that is a reflective process. That is and this is not just about discipline. This applies to the entire domain of education. So when a child is trying to learn, what we're looking for at Evolve Online is we're looking for failure. We want our children to fail. Okay, and that sounds weird coming from a principal, but basically what we're saying is failure is not a negative, should not be a negative experience. Failure should be the learning point of the experience. So when I don't succeed at something, that's opening a door to me saying, why? That's so interesting. What could I do differently next time? And in the case of discipline, you would follow exactly the same rules. You know, that's interesting that you're behaving in that way. Why? What's causing it, and what could you do differently next time? Now, obviously, the younger the child is, the more difficult it is to engage them at a metacognitive level. But you will be amazed at how little ones are able to identify and modify their own behavior if you engage them with that process. I think we are failing our children, not just in South Africa, but around the world, because we continue to follow this concept of a high stakes, marks-based approach to trying to quantify the worth of a child. And it may be in terms of you get X% on a test, or it may be, you know, you get the scroll or you don't get the scroll, or you're in the first team or you aren't in the first team. All of these create these unproductive processes which don't prepare children for the world they're going into. I am much more interested in a mastery-based approach. So what I'm interested in is, what should a child know and be able to do? And then no matter how many times it takes a child to work on that, there should never be a point that you say, we are now giving you your measurement. You are worth X%. which is how our systems work. Our systems work on the basis that you write a test. And based on that test, we then make decisions about what's possible in your future. What we find happens is that a child is more likely to succeed where they go through this iteration process of saying, why didn't it work last time? What will I do differently next time? And then they actually get the opportunity to do that again and again and again. So in a mastery-based approach, we have multiple attempts at things. We have a learning stream. We use something called the 5 facets of comprehension, which comes from the MIT Aeronautical Engineering faculty. And it deals with this process of knowing what a child should know in as granular detail as possible, designing a learning process for that, giving children opportunity to practice that, and then getting them to write the mastery test. But the mastery test that they write is a first attempt, and it's designed to try and identify the gap so that you can go back and try again and go back and try again. The most important word to use, there's 2 phrases I would encourage every parent to use with their children. The one is the word yet. Always put yet at the end of a sentence. You haven't behaved well yet, or you haven't managed to get this mastered yet. I see you got 20 out of 40 for your test. The second phrase is, that is interesting. Oh, how interesting that you got 20 out of 40 on your test. You just obviously haven't learned it yet. What could you do differently in order to get a better mark next time? And what is preventing you from being engaged? So is it because the lesson's boring? If this lesson is boring, well, let's go and find a tool online like a Khan Academy or a CK12, some free tool that you can get the lecture given to you by somebody else, because you need to find a way to make the learning engaging. And the best way to do that is to make sure that children think through their processes. I want to add one last thing. I cannot emphasize enough the role that breathing exercises and meditative exercises can play in a child's mental growth, particularly in high stress situations. And let's face it, South Africa for the last 20 decades has been one high stress situation after another. So we need to give ourselves children, because it's through that breathing, it's through that meditation that you activate the neuroplasticity of your brain, that you activate the ability to calm yourself and get rid of the negative chemicals that are causing bad neural pathways in your brain. The way you praise your child impacts on their learning is that you should be focusing on the action, not the outcome. So you should be focusing on, that doesn't mean to say that you need to be celebrating mediocrity. There's this kind of attitude that's prevalent that says, you know, well done, my child, you tried. Okay. Well done, my child, you tried is a fair starting point, but it shouldn't be the final point of the conversation with your child. It should be, well done, my child, you tried. What are you going to do differently next time? Or are you satisfied with that outcome? What could you improve? There's a brilliant video on YouTube called Austin's Butterfly. And it shows a process that a grade 1 child goes through, this child called Austin goes through in drawing a butterfly. And it just proves that when you don't accept a child's first effort, but insist on their best effort, that you start to unlock the potential of your child. You need to unlock that potential. So praising your child is important. And then the other thing to note is that you need to build your child's resilience. So if a child gets something right after attempting it, if maybe even after the second attempt, that's cool. You can give praise for that. But don't give praise again for the child succeeding at the same thing by doing the same amount of effort. You should be praising greater and greater amounts of effort each time. So you did well on that last time, but you've already mastered that. So I'm not going to praise you again for something you've already mastered. I want to see you take it to the next level. Then let's try and sit down and say, how do you make this better? And then I'll praise you. We also create these economies with our children where we say, if you get 40% or 80% on your test, I will give you 400 Rand, okay? And we commodify learning. We make learning something about pure financial reward or material reward. The child who becomes a sustainable learner, the child who learns for life, is the child who learns to value the learning itself rather than the reward they get for the reward's important. I'm not telling you not to reward, but I'm telling you not to let the focus be, I now get a new PlayStation because I got 4 distinctions. Okay, sure, give them a PlayStation, but reward the 4 distinctions, or reward rather the effort that led. If your child gets 4 distinctions without putting in much effort, please don't give them the PlayStation. Okay, because if they can get that level without and here I am talking about marks again, and I don't want to talk about it, but I'm just drawing a parallel as in terms of what is mostly experienced in the world. That's what you will find in the world, because you're rewarding the outcome. So if you've decided on a reward for your child, if they get a certain academic outcome, if they master certain things, don't give them the reward if there's not a appropriate effort that had to go in to achieving that reward.